Greetings, all of you. Long time no see. Uh, woo-wee, that was one heck of a month that we just had, and I think a lot of it's been pretty good, perhaps better than I expected. So, I'm gonna go over some of it today and what it means. First, I'm gonna have to start with some bad news, though, which was I'm sure you've already heard about the capitulation on the government shutdown that happened just a couple of weeks after that election. Um, yeah, that's how long I've been gone. But what happened there, and it was exactly what I said. I said that there was no guarantee that we were going to have a particularly lasting impact from that election result, at least in the near term, that happened on November 4th of this year, which was again the last time that I was here. Was for that result, but and it's exactly what I thought would happen, which is that in general, it's better to assume that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And there's a lot of useful stuff that's happened this month, but I would prefer to have just have that be out there, that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And we should have these kinds of plans in the back of our pocket. So the plan that I have, the main plan that we should all get on board with pretty quickly. It's relatively easy. It doesn't involve a lot of sacrifice on the part of regular people like you or I. Would be that we would have to have a strike of the service workers who serve the wealthy and powerful people in this country. If we could have that kind of a strike, and again, one of the main reasons this would work is because very few of these wealthy, powerful people interact with us on a day-to-day basis. They don't use the same services we use, and so we could make their lives miserable without much sacrifice. All we would have to do is compensate the people going on strike for the money they would have received doing those jobs. And given that it's only probably a few 100,000 people in this country that serve the needs and cater to the wants of the wealthy and powerful, because of that, I would believe that it wouldn't be particularly hard to pay for their living expenses off of donations, because the ratio is much less than for a real general strike. So that's the lead. I've buried it in all of the other videos where I've talked about that lead, but that is the lead, and it's something that we're going to have to do. And this regime, the self-proclaimed Trump administration, has not used all of its tricks yet. It has a few more up its sleeve, like potentially gutting the Voting Rights Act. And we ought to have backup plans in that kind of situation. We can't just allow ourselves to be, oh well, we lost. It's too late. And that's not. It's too late for the work that we have to have any meaning, that we've done to have any meaning, because global warming is just going to wipe us all off the face of the earth. That's not something that we should ever have to say. Like, I wouldn't say that. I would say it in a very different way. if that was going to happen. I wouldn't necessarily really bother staying because there isn't much of a purpose for me anymore if that was going to happen. So we have to have backup plans if something like that happened, because again, we cannot afford to have this go a year over schedule. And it's crazy to think about getting rid of an authoritarian regime as being something that has a schedule, but in this case it does because of global warming. And it's a sucky reality that we live in, so we have to have backup plans that we can put into effect reliably. And that's one of them, is that we could have a strike of all of the people who serve the wealthy and powerful. And we could use that to force them to the negotiating table. Maybe have a constitutional convention or something else like that. So as I go through the news, and there's a lot of things that are indicating that there might be some kind of a quiet fizzling out of this regime, but there's always the possibility that that doesn't happen. And so here is what we're going to have to do. Here's what's actually happened over the past month. Sorry. I must be sounding not particularly cogent. This is the first week that I'm out of school, finally, which is why I'm able to come back to this channel. I basically had a straight month of wall-to-wall homework and assignments, and whenever I didn't, I had other personal things, and that's finally done. So I can focus on my duty as a citizen and not on myself anymore, which is nice. So, what's happened after the 8 senators, and it was many more that wanted to do it, but they played Susan Collins so that they wouldn't have to take the rage from their constituents, which, by the way, what that means is that they know that what they're doing, if somebody is doing that, it means that they know that it's wrong and they want to do it anyway. So remember that. In any case, so I'm trying to move on to the next week. One of the advantages of getting rid of that government shutdown, I would argue that it wasn't worth it. But one of the advantages of it, it was definitely not a good decision to make at the time. One of the advantages of that kind of a government shutdown is that I should get better lighting. In any case, one of the advantages of government shutdown is that we got to have the representative from Arizona, who was Adelita Grajava, the woman who promised to sign the discharge petition as the 218th vote. That was able to happen once the House was finally forced to open and do budget work. And what that did, in general, beyond just getting the Epstein files released, which is not really happening right now, they're really trying to redact and hide as much as they can, and a lot of this stuff is probably going to get destroyed and hopefully backed up so that we can release it for real in the next administration. But this Epstein files discharge petition also really blew wide open a hole in the Republican caucus and made it like they've actually started in general disobeying Donald Trump and following more of the rules of how they're supposed to behave rather than just being complete houseplants. And what that means is that some of my analysis may have been too pessimistic about these people. And we are more likely to see, like, for instance, the trials is the wrong word, the hearings on the blowing up of boats in the Caribbean, fishing boats that are very unlikely to actually have any drugs on them. The hearings on that took place in Congress would definitely not have taken place several months ago. Something like that would have been impossible. And we've been seeing it as well with the recent discharge petition that was filed to get the ACA tax credits extended, which is not going to save everybody. Like, the absolutely indigent and poor are still going to lose access to Medicaid, but people who work jobs and are unable to qualify for Medicaid but have the ACA tax credits, that it would really help them to be able to have those restored. And there's many other things where, like, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. That's not always true now. That's not uniformly true. And I would argue that these senators and representatives are, now that they've discovered that they can tell him no, I think they're going to do it more. Another thing as well that I also noticed, this was one of the earliest cases where they said no to him, was the idea of nuking the filibuster, getting rid of the filibuster, which I don't have a problem with in general. I don't think that a supermajority, and we're going to need a supermajority for other reasons. I don't think a supermajority is a good way to have to get legislation passed, just conventional legislation. I don't agree with that. I thought they should have gotten rid of it under Biden, but right now what the filibuster was it was a way for Republicans to not have to do votes on legislation that would give Trump the power, not all of the power that he wants, but legislation that would muddy the waters and that would make it very difficult to take him to court for his unconstitutional behavior. There's all kinds of things that could have been done with a simple majority to ensure that to give Trump more of the powers that he wanted, the autocratic powers that he wanted. And John Thune refusing to get rid of the filibuster was a major act, a major part of that. This was why I believed that he would do something like January 6th. Even though he won and he was going to be in office regardless, this was why a smart authoritarian would have done an actual physical coup. I've used that term over and over and over again to distinguish from what happened with Doge, which was not a physical coup. It did not involve anything other than parts of the executive branch. It was against the law, but it wasn't a wholesale destruction of the concept of checks and balances. And this exact thing that's going on now is the exact reason why a smarter version of these authoritarians would have actually done a physical coup. Because it doesn't work when when you try to take this kind of power without creating terror among physical terror among your people, eventually they're going to be afraid of elections because you didn't shut them down. And I can't believe that this has happened yet, but it's happening now. And people are thinking about resigning as well, which would give Democrats the majority potentially before the midterms, which was something that I thought might happen. But I thought that it would happen. I thought that it would only happen after, for instance, a general strike originally. I predicted that we would be much closer to that today after some kind of intense, much more intense, state-sanctioned political violence took place. Later on in the fall of this year, it was when I expected that, and I expected that we would be in the middle, potentially, or heading towards a general strike right now. But that's what I believed would... I didn't believe that they would just do it because they believe there are going to be elections. Like, that's a dumb thing to believe in an authoritarian regime. But if enough of them are naive and dumb, and if Donald Trump isn't just going to say the quiet part out loud and send thugs into the Capitol building and actually perform his physical coup, then, like, maybe they're going to get their naive thing that they naively believe. Like, maybe they can wish 2026 midterms into existence just by virtue of being naive and believing them. I'm referring, of course, to the Republican members of Congress. And, like, I didn't think that they would do that. Like, when the big, beautiful bill passed, one of the things that I believed was that it would simply enslave them to Donald Trump because they were saying, you know what, screw it, we're not going to have 2026 midterms. We're going to ride forever and ever with whatever Trump is going to try to do to keep us in power forever, and we are not going to give, and so we don't care. Like, we're going to do this thing, and this commits us. Like, now we're not representing our people anymore. We're all about staying in power forever and latching ourselves onto Trump so that he can help us illegally stay in power forever. That's what I expected when the OBBB passed. But so far, it's like they forgot they ever did the things in that bill, and I don't quite get it, but I'll take it. I would say that these people, and one of the things I don't like about these people that are resigning is that, like, why they're resigning in order to get themselves out of the spotlight, but they're not willing to actually do what's necessary to impeach and convict Trump and Vance and the administration, and to allow, as the presidential line of succession would happen, if you got rid of Trump and Vance and everybody, you would have somebody in Congress and you could start fresh with a clean slate with some Republican from Congress, which, again, these Republicans are quite, at least, sympathy for authoritarianism. I don't like any of them. And even if they weren't, they're global warming deniers, which is honestly worse than being an authoritarian. But these people, still, they would beat the heck out of having Donald Trump in power. And, like, I would love to see. That's something I would love to see if we had any kind of strike. And honestly, like, the fact that that there's a possibility now that this might be solved the boring way is kind of disappointing to me, because it gives us, the people, less flexibility to decide what the outcome is going to be. Like, if we don't have a general strike, then it's not likely that we're going to have a constitutional convention. It's not likely that we're going to be able to depose all of these officials that are currently breaking the law and replace them with people that at least vaguely have sympathies with the law. Like, if our government could even function as well as an average state government in a place like North Dakota could function, that would still be miles ahead of what we have now with Trump. Like, that's not going to happen. And there's a good chance that we could have a Democratic primary if we don't open up the process a little bit more. We could have a Democratic primary where somebody like Gavin Newsom could win, and I'm going to describe in graphic detail, just for a minute, what would happen if Gavin Newsom won the primary and became president. 2031, January, because that's the summer in Antarctica, Thwaites Glacier would collapse. By October of that year, 1 billion people would be displaced, and all of our major coastal cities would be underwater. And he would lose in 2032, and he never was able to put together in the first place in 2028 a big coalition because he was so uncharismatic, and so he's basically the male version of Kamala Harris. He would easily lose, the white male version of Kamala Harris. He would definitely lose in 2032 with all of the carnage going on, all of the migration, all of that crap. And by 2038, we would have a nuclear war that wiped out all of our infrastructure. Most of the people, but more importantly, all of the infrastructure that we would need to survive climate change. And within about 100 years, there would not be a single human on this earth. That's what would happen if we have a highly imperfect, cowardly person like Gavin Newsom. If we have a Merrick Garland or somebody like that. If we have somebody that would rather obey the Antarctic Treaty, for that matter, that would rather obey the Antarctic Treaty than save the human race. Somebody that would rather follow the law than save the human race. And I know it's hypocritical for me to be saying this stuff when one of the things I'm judging Trump on is that he's breaking the law. But honestly, the most important part about what makes Donald Trump an awful leader right now, by far, is the global warming denial. That's what all the other stuff is, just a multiplier to that. That's the main issue. And if we have somebody that's not willing to break some rules, if it's necessary to save the human race, like the human species, not just willy-nilly for the sake of it, but somebody who's willing to kind of steamroll and judge and even bully, if he has to, other countries into doing what's necessary. If we don't have somebody like that, then it is overwhelmingly likely that we're not going to make it. And so we have to focus on these primaries, but honestly, I would rather that we have a wholesale political change, and there are some ways in which I miss the idea, and we'll probably have to see it again anyway, because there's always the Supreme Court. There are ways in which, and things that they could do. I miss the idea of being able to have a clean break with the past and to just completely to have an override switch to all of this. And I do think that we should be planning for that. I don't. I have not. I've made so far all of my plans have been around how would we leverage, and how would we come out. How would we win the peace in a scenario in which we have that kind of a clean break. And if we don't, then I haven't made any plans for how to deal with this if we solve this in the boring way. I would really appreciate some input from people that have expertise on this subject of nonviolent resistance. Uh, a little bit of creator drama as well. I've really been getting on Angela of Park Rose Permaculture. I've really been getting on her, behind, uh, verbally, of course, to convince her that she has to read the new science on global warming. She hasn't been willing to do it so far. She has not been willing to read that science, or at the very least, if she has, she's not factoring it in to any of her planning decisions. And, like, we need planning. Maybe, I don't know. I don't like expressing doubt on this. Maybe we should have a little more flexibility. Maybe I am a little bit too inflexible about my plans, but there's not a lot of flexibility in terms of the actual spec that we have to meet, the actual deadline that we have to meet. There's not a lot of flexibility in that at all. So I don't know, but in any case, we have to be able, whatever happens, we have to be able to win the peace. And I'm happy that I'm out of school so that I can finally start doing this work full time. I've been weekly attending Indivisible meetings for the past several weeks. I've been everyone that's been available for me so far. And I'm going to be able to actually put effort into doing my duty from now on, now that I'm out of school. And I wish I had been out of school when I wish I hadn't gone in the first place for the first semester. Take that semester off and just dealt with Trump and kept him out of office in the first place. And I think I could have done it. But what we that's the past. I'm just glad that I'm out now and I can finally start doing stuff to protect this country now. That's gonna have to be it for today, I guess. There isn't much more I can think of. Oh, the Democrats have also just refused to do another shutdown, which makes sense because people don't trust them anyway now. But it's ridiculous. It's gonna be up to these Republicans now. And honestly, I would like, I'm glad that our morale is high, but at some point when we do have more infrastructure in place, I would like to have that. I would like to have the opportunity to really overhaul this political system in a way that's not boring, in a way that changes things like the barriers to participation. I mean, I can't serve in federal office because of my age, and I think I would be useful in federal office, but I'm not legally allowed right now, and that's something that we might be able to revisit if we were to have a convention. And so in any case, it's just something to throw out there. I hope you're all doing well. Congratulations to everybody that's been doing protesting, as it's been getting colder out. I hope that you all are. I hope that you're all safe. I'm sorry about being so unable to put together coherent sentences right now, but if I waited for the time that I was able to, I would never make this video. I have to get back on the bandwagon. So I I hope that you all stay safe in the holiday season and be of good cheer, because these people have made a bunch of awful mistakes, and we definitely have another chance, regardless of what it looks like. Keep your morale up, and I pray for you all. Take care. Bye.